Hi, I'm Sue Stockdale, and welcome to the Access to Inspiration podcast, the show where you can be inspired by people who may be unlike you. We hope their experiences and insights cause you to reflect on your own perspectives about the world and make you think. For episode 82 today, my guest is Sebastian Rohr from Germany, who's a tech entrepreneur. He works in the field of identity and access management as well as information security. Now, given that the theme for this series is health and well-being, I wanted to know from Sebastian why there is a high incidence of stress and burnout in this industry. And I'll also be finding out how we can keep safe in cyberspace. Welcome to the podcast, Sebastian.
Hi, Sue. Pleasure to be here.
I was really excited when I knew I was going to be speaking to somebody whose background is to do with information security and keeping us safe on the digital environment. And the question that always frustrates me is, how do we keep our passwords safe when we haven't got the capacity to have that memory to hold all those passwords that we have?
Sue, you're absolutely right. That is something that everybody struggles with. And it's so annoying, and it's an increasing problem. And I guess that I would have like 250, 300 password username combinations that I need to remember. To be honest, the users should definitely deploy any kind of password management solution. One of the all-time favorites, at least here in Germany, in the open source community, people always try to avoid paying for stuff that is about security. It would be KeePass. KeePass is an open source solution. It's been around quite some time. I've seen it in use in corporate environments too, where the organizations actually have provided some sponsoring to the guys who created and maintain the source code. So KeePass it is. Else do get a license for one of those more fancy password saves. I won't drop any names here, but yeah, do that. Get yourself a password management tool. And let me just go 2 steps further. I learned quite some time ago that profiling is a thing and that you should avoid using the same username in all the services that you're using. So do not only have your password manager tool select a password for you, which is the easiest to do because it sort of maxes out the security. Also, try to have that tool remember the distinct username that you're using for each services. And do not just vary your standard username because, well, those technologies that are out there are pretty much able to combine those with a fuzzy filter. So I really recommend, if you're online very much, if you're using dozens of services, get yourself a different username for the different services, because else somebody will be able to profile you across all those applications. And then you are definitely a target.
Well, there's so many routes we could take from this conversation from what you just said, Sebastian. And it's making me think about our digital identity. And before we dive into some of the practicalities or what our listeners might be thinking of in relation to managing their digital identity, I want to know a bit about your identity and what got you interested in this subject in the first place.
I must admit that I'm sort of a nerdy kid of the 90s. Before personal computers became the thing to have at home, it was those small home computers like the Commodore C64 and the Commodore Amiga. I was one of those, I must say, pretty white skinned guys. I didn't live in the basement, but I didn't get out much between, let's say, 13 and 16, 16 and a half or what, because I was really in my room and getting acquainted with the technology. Yes, playing lots of games, and swapping them. Yes, I was one of those really, really bad guys doing the sharing. So, yeah, I'm pretty much in the IT sector since I was a teen, and it sort of stuck. It was a hobby. And then I decided against making that hobby my profession. I'm actually a trained chemical lab assistant. I received vocational training as a chemical developer with Bayersdorf. You probably have heard of Nivea skincare, stuff like that. And also Tesa, the German brand of the other adhesive tape manufacturer. And I learned everything around chemistry because I had chemistry in my high school diploma as one of the majors that I had. So I wanted to study chemistry, but after that, finished the vocational training, all my managers said, you know what, Sebastian, In Germany, you have to have a PhD in chemistry to have some sort of career. And I figured in Germany, until you get your diploma, which is sort of now the master's, it's about 5 years. And then another 5 years to get your PhD. And I figured, like, now I'm 22, I finished my vocational training, another 10 years. Well, I'm 32 before I earn decent money. No. So didn't go along with that and stopped that.
So there you have turned your hobby then into your career.
I took that, let's say, 4 year break from computer technology between my 19th and 23rd birthday, but then sort of got back to it because during my bachelor's study course, I joined Siemens as a working student, as a part-time student, and worked in the network services department. I sort of stuck in that business and I learned everything around internet and networking in the late 90s. So I was definitely a pioneer in that direction. And during that time, I actually worked in the department that later became the identity management part of the Siemens Corporation. They had a product there, and I had my first contact with that technology. And well, I never got away from that anymore. So I'd say I've been working in IT identity management for 25 years now, which is longer than it's actually called like that. So yeah, remembering that, sometimes I feel old.
Well, it does seem that today, more than ever, our digital identity and how we manage it is super critical to all our aspects of our lives, and even critical to the way societies and economies work. I know that Sweden, for example, is leading the way in becoming a cashless society when our digital identity will be the primary way there, I imagine, that people will live their lives. From your perspective, what do you see as being, I guess, the benefits and also just the potential drawbacks for us moving very much more into that digital space?
So, first of all, that stuff that we've now experienced for the last 2.5 years during the pandemic is definitely been a boost to digitalization, digital transformation, especially here in Germany, where I sometimes feel I live in the dark medieval ages. When I compare that to, let's say, Sweden, let's say Estonia, and the other Baltic states, they are light years ahead with their digital services, especially at public services. I am a digital citizen of Estonia myself. So I have a digital ID of Estonia. I can do business in Estonia and I never leave my chair. I've never been to Estonia, but I'd actually be able to found a limited or another kind of company, rent a business like office there without ever going there, which is quite awesome from my perspective. Those are definitely the benefits. The downside of that is we definitely become more traceable, more trackable. Whatever we do online can and will be logged by someone, be it because we're just subscribing to it and being a user of it, like Facebook. They are definitely one of the organizations with the Meta Corporation behind that, who actually vacuum in all the information about us and our behavior online. And being it not so easy to actually create different online personas and having that reverted back to that one digital identity that we have definitely creates some issues because people with the proper technology and skills out there will be able to pull up to the surface stuff that we would definitely rather like to be hidden in the darker parts of the net, let's say that. So yeah, it's definitely something to think twice about.
So, even as we're speaking so far, Sebastian, I'm getting the sense that it could be quite a stressful industry to work in. I'm wondering, A, if you would agree with that. And yes, if you do agree, how have you managed stress and has it affected you?
So this is a big chance to speak out loud about that. IT in itself, but especially information security and IT security, is a pitch black, dark place to go work wise. Well, the bright side of it, I'll never be unemployed. Even if I run down my current company and it goes bankrupt, with a snip of a finger, I'll get a really, really well paid salary job somewhere else in a matter of days. The downside of that is the stress level in that industry is immensely high. There was a Twitter conversation going on just last week where somebody was pondering the question why everybody in security wants to become a Chief Information Security Officer, a CISO, which is quite a nice acronym. Same like CIO, like Chief Information Officer. Most people say career is over. And well, CISO career is securely over because you're hitting a dead end there. People burn out in that vertical quite quickly. And that's due to the fact that the work environment there is almost certainly giving you a situation every other week where the candle actually burns from both sides. It's like all those critical things that happen. A new exploit, a new vulnerability comes around, and then suddenly you, your teammates, your management is all like running around like crazy. Oh, we need to find these systems that are vulnerable for that. We need to patch that. And it's all super duper critical. And yeah, you're bound to burn out if you do not take care. And unfortunately, that is nothing that gets taught at university or at the college or even the school. So I've seen many, many people aside myself being trapped there and being stuck in that really cold, dark place and not knowing how to get out of that dark place. It's an immensely stressful job. And if you aren't really made for that, I don't recommend going there. Else, yeah, well, learn to cope with the stress.
It does sound like a real challenge, Sebastian, and your short comment at the end about learn to cope with the stress sounds like very simple advice and yet sometimes difficult to do. I know you have a motorbike and a bicycle. It seems to me that perhaps moving away from the dark place physically is one way that you might manage your stress.
Please don't use your car or your motorcycle in those situations. Please, please. Anything that has an engine in it, be it an electrical one or combustion one, don't. I always tend to say that the human as such has been hunted by tigers, by lions, by whatever. So we have that fight or flight thing in ourselves, and walking it off is the best recommendation I can give. I suffer from high blood pressure. And it's been times where it was really, really bad. So I could physically feel it that there's something wrong. The only two things that really, really help me are either get out of the situation, literally drop everything, switch off the computer, or just leave it there, get out of the office, get out of the building, get into the woods, into the field, whatever, where there's sunshine, where there is air, walk it off, run it off in the evening or in the morning, whatever. The physical, something that gets you there, that is the way to do to cope with that. Else, you will never be able to relieve the stress level that's been building up in the job.
And in terms of having people to talk to or family members, friends around to support you, do you find that that helps?
Oh, yes, definitely. I would actually say three groups of people. One is actually your peers and your colleagues because they know exactly where you are. So you definitely have something to resonate with them. But that is a bit of a problem. And I think everybody can see that because it's more of the mirror that you're looking at. People like your family, your close friends, who hopefully you did not recruit from work, or at least some of them, talking to them and getting into an exchange with them is definitely helpful. And finally, something that is not normalized enough, getting professional help. Actually, having a mentor, a counselor, a shrink to talk to is definitely helpful, especially if you already passed that threshold and are in that dark, cold place. Get that professional help. I got it myself when I got my burnout 3.5 years ago. And for me, as an engineer, it was a rational decision. It was really a rational decision. I need help. I'm a consultant. People come to me to talk about identity, to talk about security. And I've always taken that as the proper decision. Go get professional help. And it helped. I had both. I had both a counselor that I could talk to and a what's it called, a psychologist, right? So I had the benefit of having both to talk to. And One of them actually prescribed me some medicine to cope with the actual situation, which I was able to get rid of a year later or so. But yeah, get a good network of friends to talk to, have your family. And the most important line there is if you are really in a situation where you're feeling depressed, to call it out, get professional help. I can just not recommend it more than just saying it out here very openly and very loudly.
Sounds like wise advice, Sebastian. You mentioned earlier that you could get a job within 5 minutes if you didn't have a job today. It's such an industry that's in demand. So it strikes me there has to be something more than just earning money from it. What does motivate you?
Yeah, I would definitely be in a position to say that's my calling. When I finish an advisory, when I finalize a project with a customer, and I feel good that I actually made the world a bit better. I took my torch and held it into a really dark corner, and I made all the bugs and everything that's nasty in there go away, and I'm happy. I have a feeling of accomplishment, and I go to bed at night and I just feel good. The problem is the next morning, at least two people call me and tell me, Sebastian, I went down to the cellar and I found a really, really dark corner and I want you to help me with that. Or even better, Sebastian, I went out there and I found all my assets are gone or they are encrypted or whatever. So for every client I help, two more come in and say, Sebastian, can you help me with that? So, yeah, as you said, our profession is in good demand, but yeah, it gets a little much every once in a while. It's definitely a motivation to know that there are so many people out there who want your help. They don't only need it, they actually want it. And if that doesn't give you a boost of confidence and feeling like you're helping someone, I don't know what does. It's just great. I feel needed every time I open up my mailbox because there are so many requests coming in.
Well, that sounds like a lovely position to be in.
Oh, it is.
I also know that you have done some work in some of the developing countries
Yes.
in relation to using your expertise. Tell me about that.
So I'd like to say that my 9 to 5 daylight job is helping people in the industry or in Germany in the DACH region with their security issues, with their identity topics, and provide them with a strategic approach. But whenever I do that, I feel like I'm helping, I don't know, a 0.1% of the world population with the stuff that I do. And that made me sad when I realized that I solve really, really tricky problems, but the impact, which is a word that you know is very important for both of us, the impact that I have there is on a global scale, not visible. I do benefit from the feeling that I help this and that corporation or that organization to do this and that, but will you read about that in the newspaper? Will somebody write a Wikipedia article about that? Probably not. 12 years ago, I had for me, a one in a lifetime chance because I was invited to Jamaica for work, which was in itself great because the workshop I was invited to was late January, early February in 2010. And the organization that invited me was the IADB, the Inter-American Development Bank, which is sort of a funding organization that helps developing countries close the gap to the Western and Eastern developed countries. And one of those was actually help the Jamaican government to come up with a Jamaican national ID scheme and provide a national identity for each Jamaican, which was quite the honor for me. And it was just great. It was wonderful to go to one of those countries and be welcomed as an expert. And I had like 150 government agency officials and representatives sitting in a room listening to me about what they could do to improve all the lives of all Jamaicans, be there Jamaicans living in Jamaica or actually expats being in the US, in Europe, whatever, because the national ID entitles to so much, like starting with a passport and stuff. Work permits, you can't get that if you don't have a national ID. And that was a trigger for me. And I did some of those assignments in the last decade. And I just love going to those countries. I just love helping there because the last one was a trip to Pakistan, one of the largest communities on earth. Is like 270 million citizens right now. The projections say that there's going to be 350 million Pakistani within the decade. So the growth rate is really important. And as Pakistan suffers from one of the lowest child registration rates in the world, it is super duper important for them to have a working scheme so that every child gets registered, every child gets their birth certificate, so that every child gets school education, that they get healthcare and everything. And that was a project I did with UNICEF. And I'm pretty proud that I was able to contribute my share there. And that is definitely impact. That is, for me, something where I can put my knowledge and my capabilities to work and actually help millions of people where it is really, really necessary.
I can hear, as you're describing that, the sense of bigger impact that can bring to you, Sebastian. Just coming back to one of the things you said earlier, you've mentioned a few times about shining the torch in dark places. I'm wondering what brings you into the light. If we imagine that dark place is, well, not imagine, it is stressful for you. You're saying there's a never-ending number of bugs down there that need to be tackled.
And they multiply at tremendous rates, unfortunately.
So I want to look at the opposite perspective to say what gives you inspiration or what brings you light, what draws you into the light.
Two things. It's definitely my three best friends. We have a chat group that's titled The Fantastic Four. And we just love that because we all live at least 500 miles apart. So we all come from the same county. Three of us have been raised in the same parish. One was like 20, 30 kilometers away. But when you're like 13, 14, 15, well, 30 kilometers is quite a stretch. So we relied on our parents to transport it back and forth. But we've been friends for the majority of our lives. Now I'm closing in on 50. So I can say that these three friends I have had for 35 years and more. We actually celebrated our 25th going on a short cruise, by the way, which was quite nice. And those three guys, they are the ones I rely most on. It's tremendous. I just love how close we are to each other, despite the fact that we rarely see each other face to face, especially in the last 2.5 years with the pandemic going on. But it's like you can call them in the dead of the night and they will be there for you. It's just what definitely helps me through tough times. And it's my personal support group, I'd say. And the other thing that actually gives me joy and makes the sun shine is my daughter. She's 11 years old, and I think the English saying or proverb is the apple of my eye. It's definitely something that I care most about, that I have a good bond with my daughter and have lots of activities. I just got back from a father-daughter vacation with her in Spain, and that was just good. We go on father-daughter dates where we both dress up and I take her out, and that's something that we really love. And I really love that at the age of 11 she challenges me. So we go climbing together, and I'm afraid of height. I have to admit it. I'm really not the guy climbing up somewhere and feeling like good. It gives me the shivers. And she's been going climbing with me for like 2.5, 3 years now, and it's always a big challenge for me. But I actually feel energy boosted and really high on endorphins whenever the two of us master one of those climbing trials. It's just great. So I definitely get a lot of energy from spending time with my daughter and having that bond. This is something I really enjoy most.
Just listening to you talk about the people that matter to you, Sebastian, to me, you're dispelling the myth about geeks being only having their head in computers.
Yeah. So, despite the fact that I started out this little session here admitting that I'm a nerd or a geek, and I spent my early years in my own room playing computer games, I definitely consider myself a people person, which I must admit, in comparison to all my colleagues, I'm definitely one of the more outspoken and, let's say, extrovert. Yes, extrovert is definitely a good word for that. And that sets me apart from the typical picture of a nerd, because I do know that Many of those are good with talking to machines, like typing, and not so much talking to people. So I definitely have an exception there. And I must admit that this is definitely one of the reasons why I am successful in that space.
Well, I can hear that humor in your voice and that cheery disposition that we're experiencing on this conversation, Sebastian.
Yeah.
So, finally, just looking ahead, Sebastian, given that I'm sure pretty much all our listeners will have some sort of digital identity in the world out there, given they're probably listening to a podcast on some sort of technical device, what should we be paying attention to manage our digital identities from your perspective into the future?
We talked about the personal aspects of that, maintaining your own profile and securing your passwords, and even, let's say, diversifying your digital ID by using different usernames in the different networks. Now, let's take the outside perspective. Let's just wrap it around and say most of those technologies that we are using are bound to some kind of social networks. The large ones that are out there, well, the younger people use different ones than we do, but it's all about connections. We are only small pieces of puzzles in there, and pay attention whom you connect to. The problem we're facing right now in all those networks is there are so many fake profiles, and there are actually paid actors out there, state sponsored actors, agitating and doing misinformation on behalf of political actors, foreign states, even large companies, and trying to influence not only you yourself, but a whole population of a nation state, or all of the Europeans, or all of the US citizens. That is, well, we have that real war going on in the Ukraine, between Ukraine and Russia, but there is a cyber warfare going on, and it does influence us. The professional term for that is sock puppets. There are so many sock puppets out there. Those are fake profiles operated by special forces of those nation states that try to convince us that the reality is a little different from what we see in our media. And I myself almost fell victim to that a few weeks ago when one of those profiles, pretty well made up, tried to establish contact with me and was seeking advice and mentoring because that, well, you can imagine that it was a really, really well looking Asian young woman who had just assumed the position of an IT security whatnot in a company in Ireland. And soon she was switching the mode of connection from the platform to WhatsApp. And after that, she was trying to extract information from me. And that was definitely one of those operatives. And please pay attention to that. Protect yourself, protect your online profile. Do not just wildly accept any request to connect. Do not click on any links that you get sent, no matter if it's via a messaging app or a simple SMS or in a network. Always double check, because it only takes one wrong click and you and your computer and your digital identity can be endangered. Just try to double check where that comes from and if that is a real person. Well, if somebody on a business network connects with you and this person does not have connections in their own organization, that should raise an eyebrow. Said, that's odd. Like, only competitors? Probably not a real profile. So it's about the other. Take care and watch out. And if there's one last recommendation I can give, watch out for your friends too, for your parents, for the people that are not such computer whiz kids. They fall victim to those schemes quite a lot. And that is definitely a thing that I care about. Try to protect your community also.
Well, I daren't almost ask this final question, Sebastian, is how can people find out about you? Because I'm not even sure that you want to connect with them.
Yeah. So as I said, I'm nearing 50 of age. So I don't do those really hip new things like TikTok and Instagram. I do not feel beautiful enough to have an Instagram account. But people can find me on those rather old school networks like Twitter. My Twitter handle is WI_ING. Wing, which is an abbreviation of the course I took in university, Wirtschaftsingenieur. So WI_ING. And else, you can definitely find me through the website of my company, which is umbrella.associates. And Well, finally, I'm on LinkedIn. You can find me there on LinkedIn/Sebastian Rohr. Yeah, so try to contact me. I'd be happy.
Brilliant. Well, it's been really informative to hear what you have to say about this dark world of digital identity and keeping ourselves safe online, Sebastian. I've really enjoyed our conversation, and I think the sense of getting to understand your identity as well as the digital identity has been a very interesting conversation today. So thank you for your time.
Thanks, Sue. It's been a pleasure.
Well, wasn't Sebastian interesting to speak to? And he gave us some really useful tips for keeping our digital identity safe. Remember, you can subscribe to this podcast on Apple Podcasts and many other platforms. And you can keep connected with us on social media on LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook and Instagram. Just search for Access to Inspiration. We'll be back again next week. I'll be speaking to Brian Sachetta, a software developer who overcame stress and anxiety by using some of the skills he learned from computer science. I hope you can join us then.